Not long ago, Joe Abel interviewed a young man who has rocketed to public attention by selling a huge number of books to people who are frightened about the future. Let's take a look at that conversation.
Well, we're going to talk about the future in a way that I think will affect everyone watching, and I want you to pay close attention. You might even get a pencil and paper to take some notes. We're going to be talking with Doug Casey, who is the author of a book which has been on almost every bestseller list now for several weeks. It will probably stay there because it's called Crisis Investing. Welcome to Montage, Doug.
Thank you, Joe.
Well, what does crisis investing mean?
Well, basically, what I'm saying is that we're entering a tremendous period of crisis during the 1980s, and the book postulates another depression that is not only going to be worse than the depression of the 1930s, but probably much worse.
Now, let me ask you a couple of questions to defuse what a lot of people probably are thinking. One, that you have just invented this to sell a book.
No, that's untrue. I've followed the advice that I give in my book for the last 10 years, and it's treated me very, very well. I believe that in the real world, actions have consequences, and the primary actor in our society today, in the economic society, is the government. And the government has taken some very destructive actions which are having some very bad consequences. So I'm trying to make some predictions that people can use individually to keep themselves from being washed away in the tidal wave. What I want to see people do is take control of their own lives. And in my book, I lay out particular strategies that you can and should do right now to make sure that you're one of the survivors. Because a depression is a good thing in many ways. It's good for the society as a whole because hopefully when things get washed out, we're going to start rebuilding on a new foundation, a solid foundation, number one. And number two, a whole new class of millionaires is going to be created in the next 10 years. These are...
Well, I was going to say, I was going to give you the lead. Tell us what to do now, and we'll still buy your book, but maybe if you don't, what can we do?
Okay, I don't want people to do what I'm telling them to do just because I say it, because somebody else can come along and say something very different tomorrow. I want them to try to understand these things. I'd say that the soundest foundation that your listeners can build on is to start buying gold as quickly as possible, as much as possible, and consistently as possible over the years to come. People should not be saving money in the form of bank accounts or insurance policies or bonds. All of those are the kiss of death in the years to come. They should start moving out of those liabilities of the U.S. government or of corporations that could fail and getting into gold, which can't be defaulted on and can't be deflated. That's number one.
Okay. Number two.
Number two, I think people have got to stop living in the past. They've got to start thinking in terms of the fact that inflation creates chaos. Inflation creates a class of speculators, and people have got to start understanding this isn't the 1950s or the 1960s where it's slowly onward and upward. They've got to start thinking a bit like somebody that's looking 1 or 2 steps ahead. And in my book, I mention a lot of opportunities that have the potential of going 20 to 1 or 50 to 1 in real terms over the next few years.
Well, give an example of that.
Well, I think a good example of that is the stock market itself is going to be a speculator's delight. Fundamentally, the Dow Jones should be worth 300. I think it's going to go to 3,000 instead, though, because people are going to panic wholesale out of dollars and bonds and so forth and get into equities. But there's one class of stocks, Joe, in particular, and these are the so-called penny mining stocks traded in Spokane, Washington, dormant mines that have not been doing anything for 40 or 50 years that with these high gold and silver prices are eventually going to strike it rich. And when they do, some of them could go 100 or, as in the past, 1,000 to 1 in price.
Is that where some of the new millionaires are going to come from you were going to talk about?
Yes, some of them will. That's right. That one class of stock is going to make fortunes.
Now, you have no interest in that mine stock or anything to do with any of that?
Oh, I don't own any of them, but I own shares of probably 100 of them or more.
Well, one could make the case that you're saying this so that you'll be one of the millionaires.
No, I'll tell you why I am saying that. Okay. Sure, but I'm going to be one of the millionaires inevitably.
Okay.
That's just because I understand the way the market works. The reason that I'm saying this and say it in my book is I believe that the people that want to take responsibility for their own lives, the pro-freedom people, are the ones that are going to tend to read my book. So that I hope that my book does its part to not only educate people to what's going on, but educate the best people, the most pro-freedom people, so that they are the class of new millionaires and the good guys are in control the next time.
Let me ask you a couple of just quick questions and give me as brief an answer as you feel that you can. Real estate, good investment for the future?
Very dangerous investment. It's gone up in the last 10 years more than anything else. It's built upon a pyramid of debt and credit. It could go higher, but I think in real terms, forget about dollar terms, that increasingly means little, but in real terms, the real estate market has had it, level at best.
Okay. The Mideast, the oil crisis, isn't that our juggler?
Yeah, I hate to see people put more emphasis on oil than they would on any other commodity that's equally strategic. Steel, copper, cobalt, chromium, all of those are essential commodities. But the Middle East is going to get worse and worse. It's going to blow up. Those people are very crazy over there. They wouldn't know what oil was unless we showed it to them, and it's a very, very, very bad situation. That's just one of about a dozen wild cards that are going to be dealt in the future.
Politics, Republican, Democrat.
Tweedledee, Tweedledum.
Yeah.
I said earlier, Joe, that actions have consequences, and the period we're going into in the 1980s is the accumulated washout of 50 years of misfeasance and malfeasance in Washington. So whether Jimmy Carter or Ronald Reagan is elected,
or John Anderson,
none of them, or Ed Clark, the libertarian, who I would personally favor, none of them are going to be able to undo the actions of the last 50 years.
Okay. Any final word for people who are now thoroughly scared to death?
Well, I'll say it again. A depression does not have to be a bad thing. It's something that hopefully is going to teach Americans a lesson. They've been living above their means for the last 50 years. They've been buying all this nonsense from their politicians that tell them that they can consume more than they can produce and still remain wealthy, and that's why our standard of living is going down. So once again, I'll re-emphasize, my main point is this. There's a lot of money that's going to be made by people that understand what's happening in society. That's why I wrote the book, and that's what I want to see the good guys do.
But I think the key is the future is going to be different from the past, and we're going to have to learn new rules. And
yeah. Well, I think the longest trend in motion is the ascent of man. It's been going on 5,000 years, and things are going to get better and better and better in the future. But over the next 10 years, or it could be longer, because I have no way of knowing how drastically the government is going to try to grab the economy in a stranglehold and tell people that we'll do something, we'll make it better. If they do something like that and we get a man on horseback, then things could get much worse than even I project them.
Yeah. Doug Casey, thanks very much. Again, the book is called Crisis Investing, and you've been listening to its author, Douglas Casey. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.